Attitude is everything. It shapes how you show up. It colors how you see the world. It determines how you handle failure, how you develop momentum, how you lead, how you bounce back, and how you live. It's not just a mood, it's a muscle. And most people don't even understand they have the capacity to shape it. They assume attitude is something you're born with or something that rises and falls with your circumstances. But that's not how it works. A winning mentality is what you build brick by brick, day by day. You've seen it. Folks with less talent but more tenacity, people under difficulty who nonetheless radiate hope, people who walk into a room and instantly increase the energy. Not because everything in their life is great, but because they've trained themselves to show up that way. That's not luck. That's effort. That's repetition. That's mindset. And it's what differentiates the people who grow from the ones who stall. Not intelligence, not opportunity, not even relationships. Because attitude drives behavior, behavior shapes decisions, and decisions impact everything else. You don't need a faultless strategy. You don't need an inspiring video every morning. What you need is a mindset wired to win, built for challenge, trained for pressure, and based in discipline. Most people don't know attitude is a habit, but it is. It's a mix of beliefs, tone, self-talk, posture, assumptions, and emotional reactions that you repeat daily. And whatever you rehearse most becomes your default. So if you wake up thinking tiny, doubting yourself, rehashing failure, you're not just having a terrible day, you're developing a negative pattern. And that pattern becomes the life you live inside. But if you shift that pattern, everything starts to change. When you choose to establish a mindset that expects progress, seeks opportunity, takes control, and leads with optimism, even when life doesn't give you reasons to smile, you become strong. You become unshakable. You become magnetic, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. You stop waiting for a pleasant mood, you make one. You stop expecting for life to treat you better. You start treating life differently. This doesn't mean avoiding adversity. It doesn't mean pretending everything's fine. A winning attitude isn't false positivity, it's actual perspective. It's power under control. It's choosing to face reality without giving up to it. It's showing up with energy that uplifts instead of energy that drains. And it's understanding that your attitude affects everyone around you, your family, your team, your clients, your friends. Your presence alters rooms for better or worse. The question is, what type of energy are you bringing with you? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to feel wonderful every day. But you do need to decide what kind of person you're going to be when life gets tough. What kind of mindset you'll carry when things go sideways. What type of voice you'll talk with when dread starts whispering again. That decision, that posture is the root of a winning attitude, that attitude on purpose. Not just as a notion, but as a daily discipline. You cease being dominated by circumstances. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop waiting and start leading. Because now you're not just hoping for a better day. You're becoming the kind of person who produces one. The first method to establish a winning mentality is by managing your self-talk. Because the words you speak to yourself aren't just thoughts. They're orders. They shape how you feel, how you act, and what you believe is possible. And most individuals don't even recognize how awful their internal language has become. They think they're being realistic. They assume they're avoiding disappointment. But in truth, they're practicing failure before life even challenges them. The most powerful person in your life is you. And the most influential voice in your life is yours. So when you talk to yourself with doubt, with shame, with sarcasm, your brain listens. It treats that statement as actuality, and then it starts to create your identity around those words. You believe you're playing it safe, but basically, you're being confined because your words are building a reality you'll eventually have to live in. That's why it's so vital to examine your language, your tone, your wording, your assumptions. If someone else spoke to you the way you speak to yourself during your lowest moments, would you want that person in your life? If the answer is no, then why are you letting that voice lead? Why are you allowing it to narrate your life? You can't afford to let negativity become your mental soundtrack, because attitude follows language. You can't walk in confidence while thinking in defeat. You can't move in clarity while speaking in uncertainty. You can't win while mumbling reasons why you'll probably lose. So you adjust the pattern. You start by noticing, not judging, just noticing. You hear yourself mutter, "I always mess this up," and you pause, you catch the remark, "I'm not good at this," and you dispute it. You hear yourself reverting to, "This is just how I am," and you fight it, not with bogus hype, but with greater truth, with aligned reality, with words that reflect who you're becoming, not who you've been. This requires work, it's repetition. It takes discipline. But the more you do it, the simpler it gets. You start catching unfavorable patterns faster. You begin reprogramming your brain in real time. You start replacing judgment with leadership, humiliation with strength, pessimism with possibilities. You begin speaking with direction, with intention, with words that build instead of break, words that energize instead of deplete. You don't have to wait till you feel good to talk powerfully. You speak loudly so you can feel differently. You lead yourself with language. And no, you don't have to be loud. You don't have to chant mantras. You just have to tell yourself the facts in a way that empowers you instead of limiting you. You have to determine that the voice in your head will become your buddy, not your opponent. That it will speak with clarity, not uncertainty. That it will speak with purpose, not pity. When you create this habit, your entire day alters. You stop dreading obstacles. You start talking to yourself like someone designed for them. You stop shrinking when things get uncomfortable. You start coaching yourself through it. You cease whirling in terror. You start grounding yourself in focus. And with time, that voice becomes automatic. It becomes normal. It becomes your default. Not because life gets easier, but because you've educated your brain to behave differently. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to win every day. But you do need to quit letting your inner language keep you locked. So write a better script and repeat it until you believe it, until it feels like yours, until it sounds like power. Because the voice you believe the most is the one you hear the most. Make sure that voice is developing something you genuinely want to live in. The second technique to creating a winning attitude is moving from expectation to appreciation. Because disappointment doesn't come from what happens. It comes from what you expected to happen. You thought it would be easier. You hoped it would come faster. You assumed they'd back you. You assumed it would work the first time. And when it didn't, you didn't just feel the loss. You felt robbed. You felt like life failed you. But life didn't fail you. Your expectations did. They weren't wrong, but they were unexamined. They were based on assumption, not strategy. And if you live in expectation without awareness, your attitude will always be fragile. It will swing up and down based on how closely reality matches your dream picture. Appreciation, on the other hand, is steady. It doesn't demand, it recognizes, it highlights what's working, even when there's still work to do. It says, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm grateful I'm not where I used to be. It says, I'm not owed anything, but I've been given a lot. And that mindset, that habit, it builds energy that supports you. It doesn't simply make you feel good, it makes you powerful. A winning attitude is never created from entitlement, it's built from thankfulness. The people who make it through the roughest seasons, the ones who keep growing, stay clear, and remain consistent, have learned to find something to admire no matter what's happening around them. Not because everything is great, but because they refuse to give their power away to their circumstances. They've educated their minds to focus on progress, not just perfection, to see lessons, not just losses, to see people, not just issues, to wake up each day looking for what's right, not just what's lacking. That shift isn't weakness, it's power. It keeps you pushing on when everything around you tells you should be bitter, angry, despairing, or done. Practicing gratitude doesn't mean disregarding pain or pretending everything is fine. It means deciding to find what's good, what's useful, what's growing. It means you stop rehashing everything that's wrong and start reinforcing what's right. Even if it's small, even if it's quiet, even if no one else notices, you begin to appreciate the chance to show up again, the lessons in the defeats, the individuals who stayed, the modest steps you took, the growth in your thinking, the discipline you didn't used to have, and the fact that you're still standing, still trying, still breathing, still creating. Gratitude isn't simply a feeling, it's a practice, it's a muscle you develop. You write it, you speak it, you train your eyes to recognize it, and you teach your brain to feed on it. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Your attitude starts to root itself on reality, not in what's lacking. That change shields you from bitterness, from burnout, from the story that says, if it's not going the way I planned, it's not worth it. Gratitude lifts you out of that lie. It anchors you in what's working, reminds you why you began, and keeps your heart gentle in a hard world. It provides you access to strength without needing conditions to be ideal, because perfect never arrives. Doesn't exist, but presence does, progress does. When your mindset is anchored on appreciation instead of expectation, You stop resenting the process and start partnering with it. You cease depending on regular successes to feel worthy. You stop waiting for things to align before you show up with serenity and purpose. So you establish this habit, you make thankfulness your default, not someday, not just on holidays, go smoothly, but daily, repeatedly, intentionally, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because thankfulness isn't just a response to wonderful things, it's a seed that creates them. The third approach to cultivate a winning mentality is to cease taking things personally. The instant you internalize everything, you relinquish your power. You transform every hurdle into a personal assault, every delay into a judgment of your worth, every disagreement into a rejection. And when that becomes your default, your emotional life becomes tiresome. Every day turns into a war to defend your identity from imagined threats. But the truth is, most of what happens around you has very little to do with you. People aren't thinking about you as much as you think. They're navigating their own storms, fears, and wounds. When you begin to perceive life through that perspective, everything softens. You don't stop caring, you just stop crumbling. A winning mentality is built on resilience, not fragility. It doesn't come apart because someone misunderstands you. It doesn't unravel when someone doesn't cheer you on. It doesn't burn energy making up stories about why things failed or what people truly meant. It doesn't transform every annoyance into an identity crisis. You need thicker skin, not a colder heart, a better internal boundary. So when the world throws criticism, misunderstanding, or upheaval to you, you can stay grounded. You can say, that's not mine to carry. You can say, that's about them, not me. You can say, this moment is hard. It doesn't define you. When you take everything personally, you lose clarity. You react instead of respond. You talk from a position of grief instead of principle. You spiral over things that don't warrant your attention. You manufacture meaning where there was just misunderstanding, and it drains you, your energy, your clarity, your strength. But when you learn to step back, to halt, to breathe, and to separate who you are from what's occurring, you become more grounded. You can take feedback without folding. You can handle confrontation without combusting. You can face critique without letting it demolish your self-worth. And you stop being easily offended, not because you don't care, but because you've learned that offense is a choice. Being triggered doesn't mean you have to react. People's remarks only hit profoundly if they strike an unhealed wound. When you know it, you start to heal instead of react. You cease allowing strangers' authority over your nervous system. You stop letting people who don't know you define your tale. You stop allowing one unpleasant moment to snowball into a bad mood, which becomes a terrible day, which might lead to a bad identity. You cease absorbing what doesn't belong to you. This habit demands self-awareness, humility, and grace. It asks that you stop thinking the worst, stop expecting assaults, and stop transferring your concerns onto every interaction. You learn to slow the story down, to question, is this really about me? You remember that you don't have to accept every opinion as the truth. When you start living this way, your thinking becomes unbreakable. You don't crumble when the wind shifts. You don't overthink every comment, email. You let things pass past you. You take what's useful and trash what isn't. You lead from a steady position. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It makes you efficient. It keeps you focused. It safeguards your serenity, since now your energy is focused toward progress, not protection, not insecurity, toward leadership, not self-preservation. So, build this habit. Pause before you internalize, breathe before you respond, and ask better questions. Don't take things personally just because they hurt. Not everything painful is personal. Sometimes, and life isn't bound to defend your ego, but you are accountable for protecting your own power. The fourth technique to establish a winning mentality is to take full ownership of what's in your control and relinquish what's not. Personal strength doesn't come from pretending life is ideal, but from choosing to be passive. It's not about controlling every detail, but about leading yourself through every storm. Ownership isn't about blame, it's about accountability, it's about maturity, it's about agency. Most individuals live on autopilot, reacting to their circumstances like a pinball, bouncing from one trigger to the next, waiting for the environment to alter before they feel empowered. But if your attitude is related to external events, it's weak. It will rise and fall with your environment, and that's no way to live. That's a reactive existence, not a life of intention. A winning mentality starts with one belief: I am responsible for me. My energy, my effort, my decisions, my reactions, my habits, my replies, my momentum. No one else can save me. No one else will handle my focus. No one else will save me from my justifications. And that belief affects everything. You stop pointing fingers. You cease waiting for others to behave a certain way before you step into who you want to be. You cease outsourcing your emotional state to others. You take the wheel and guide yourself. You say, I can't control everything, but I can decide how I show up. This habit forces you to stop being a victim of your tale and start being the author of it. It's simple to blame circumstances for a lousy attitude, to say, or, they made me feel this way. But the instant you do that, you give your power away. You become a bystander in your own life. Ownership is the reverse. It says, this is mine to lead, even when it's hard, even when it's unfair, even when it's painful, especially when it's difficult. Pain without ownership turns into suffering, but pain with ownership becomes a stimulus for growth. It converts into fuel, wisdom, and strength. This notion doesn't entail manipulating people, enduring abuse, or carrying burdens that aren't yours. It's about establishing a clear border between what you can affect and what you cannot, and focusing your energy into what you can control. You focus on your discipline, thinking, tone, preparation, planning, and viewpoint. You stop attempting to micromanage outcomes and start dominating the sources. You realize that while results can't be forced, you may create the conditions that allow them to happen. You don't wait for external incentive. Instead, you develop alignment within yourself. You stop moaning about conditions and learn to adapt. You respond, turn, and persevere. Obstacles don't derail you. They become training, an opportunity to increase your potential. This technique promotes actual confidence, not phony confidence or an inflated ego, but grounded, quiet, solid self-assurance. Because when you take ownership, you stop worrying if things will work out and start making it work. You stop questioning your capability and begin proving it. Over time, your proof compounds. At first, your wins may seem little, but they grow. Consistency develops momentum and your focus sharpens. Eventually, others notice. They notice you're no longer reactive, you're proactive, you're concentrated and intentional. Your presence influences the surroundings because someone who takes ownership of their decisions becomes someone who shapes their future. That's where legacy starts. Not in what happens to you, but in how you respond. Not in what others give you, but in what you give to yourself. Ownership is freedom, ownership is fire, and ownership is the cornerstone of a winning attitude. The sixth principle for building such mentality is to choose discipline above emotion. The gap between where you are and where you want to go won't be filled by how you feel, but by what you do. And the ability to act, regardless of your feelings, is the crucial attribute of someone who wins consistently. Many individuals live at the whim of their emotions. They do well when they feel good. They slack off when they're wary, pull back when discouraged, and quit turning up when unmotivated. Over time, people develop a life that mimics their emotional swings. But a winning attitude isn't driven by emotion. It's formed via repetition, structure, rhythm, and values that rise above ephemeral sentiments. It's about behaviors matched with your identity, not your moods. You can't build anything enduring if you only work when you feel like it. Discipline is what keeps you steady while your emotions are unexpected. This doesn't mean you disregard your emotions. It means you don't let them control your behavior. You acknowledge them, absorb them, but you don't allow them decide what type of day you'll have. You say, I feel this, but I'll still act according to my principles, not my pain. Discipline is effective because it removes the daily internal conflict, the grueling back and forth. It removes the question, do I feel like it today? Discipline has already answered that. We act anyway. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes. Since discipline accumulates, it doesn't just develop habits, it builds identity. And identification becomes your emotional anchor. When you know who you are, you stop seeking permission from your emotions. You line your behaviors with the future you're constructing, not with the feeling you're in. This is how you develop momentum, not by waiting for inspiration, but by being dependable. Dependable to yourself, dependable to your goal, and dependable to the plan you created when your mind was clear. Discipline turns good days into great ones. It transforms your awful days into mediocre ones. It raises your baseline. And that's the key, raising the baseline, not just the top. Everyone talks about the high times, the bursts of adrenaline, and the huge successes, but real greatness is formed in your regular life. It's not about how high you can soar when everything's going flawlessly. It's about how stable you remain when things aren't functioning. Discipline is what turns your regular day into something better than most people's best. It's developed through the small choices. You wake up when you said you would. You finish the assignment even when you're fatigued. You take the hard path because it's the correct one. You push yourself through the tough times instead of having the tough times push you about. And every time you do it, you gain trust, self-trust. That's what makes you unstoppable. That's what makes your mindset resilient. You don't need everything to be perfect to do what's right. You don't need ideal settings, external pressure, or a pleasant attitude. You just need the commitment you've already made. And once that commitment becomes a habit, once it's woven into who you are, your emotions stop being the deciding factor. You learn to experience fear and still take action, to feel uncertainty and keep moving, to feel disheartened and keep going, not because it's easy, but because it's who you've chosen to be. So, you establish this discipline one step at a time, one morning at a time, one task at a time. And as your discipline strengthens, your life starts to transform. You stop waiting for motivation to get moving. You stop requiring a good day to take action. You stop waiting for perfect conditions to make progress. You just move. The sixth approach for creating a winning attitude is surrounding yourself with people who expect more from you, not less. Your attitude isn't just molded from within, it's influenced by the energy around you, by the people you allow into your circle, by the standards they set, and by the language they use. If you spend too much time with folks who accept mediocrity, you'll accidentally reduce your own standards. Attitude is contagious, energy is contagious. So if you want to grow, if you want to build something substantial and permanent, you have to be merciless about who you surround yourself with, about who has access to your thoughts, who gets to speak into your vision, and whose approval you're seeking. Most individuals aren't evil. They're just not building what you're building. They're not aiming where you're aiming. They're not running at the same rate. And if you try to carry them with you, if you dilute yourself to make them feel comfortable, if you spend all your time explaining instead of performing, you'll burn out. Not because you're incorrect, but because you're misaligned. A winning mentality doesn't only need support, it needs challenge, it needs sharpening. It needs individuals who won't let you off the hook, who won't enable you to lie to yourself, who aren't impressed by your excuses. They need to care more about your future than your sentiments in the moment. This kind of cycle doesn't always seem comfortable, but it always fosters progress. These are the ones who remind you of your standards when you start falling, who see through your distractions, who point out your trends, who don't just applaud your triumphs but ask, what's next? Not because they're pushing pressure, but because they believe in your potential. And it works both ways. You become this kind of person too. You show up with both truth and grace. You encourage, but you don't enable. You support, but you also speak up. You tell your folks the truth they need to hear. You raise the temperature in the room, not lower it to make things easy. You bring clarity when things grow hazy. When you establish an environment where progress is natural, where feedback is embraced, and where vision is talked about instead of gossip, your attitude becomes unshakable. You're no longer carrying your standard alone. It's supported, strengthened, and reflected by the people around you. But if you're the most focused person in your circle is the problem. If you're the only one seeking discipline, the only one talking vision, the only one correcting behavior, then you're not in a circle. You're carrying a crowd, and a mob will deplete you. But the appropriate circle will build you. So you need to start choosing people based on alignment. It's not just about history or locality, nor only about who someone was, but who they are becoming. You let go of relationships that keep you bound to an outmoded version of yourself. This makes place for people who will push the next version of you onwards. This shift is uncomfortable. You'll outgrow folks. You'll disappoint some. You'll need to walk away from locations where mediocrity is enough. But you do it with love, clarity, compassion, and conviction because you understand the stakes and the reward. Your energy sharpens, your pace quickens, and your identity becomes solid. You surround yourself with folks who believe in your future, hold you accountable to your word, challenge your complacency, and speak to your best potential, not just your present self. Protecting your environment, curating your discussions, and picking your circle with intention is what prevents your attitude from straying. It supports what you're constructing, makes the bad days easier, and the good days even more gratifying. It transforms your discipline into a culture. You now understand that a winning mindset isn't a gift. It's a choice. It's not an emotion. It's a habit. It doesn't stem from your circumstances, it's created from your standards. It's not what happens to you that defines your mindset, but how you choose to respond. If you want to live differently, lead differently, perform differently, or love differently, your attitude must be non-negotiable, consistent, grounded, reliable. It cannot be elective, seasonal, or mood-dependent. That type of reliability doesn't appear overnight. It's trained, layered, and reinforced. You don't need to master everything at once, but you must begin living by these ideas. Start watching your self-talk and alter it from reaction to leadership. Replace weak expectations with resilient thankfulness. Stop taking things personally and begin responding with perspective. Own what's yours and release what isn't. Lead yourself with discipline when emotions aren't cooperating. Protect your environment as though your future depends on it, because it does. Everything matters. And none of it is by coincidence. This isn't about fake cheerfulness or disregarding actual difficulties. It's about establishing actual strength, quiet strength, the sort that doesn't rely on flawless conditions, doesn't need acclaim, and doesn't fade when life becomes rough. This is the core of a winning attitude. It's about consistency under pressure, grace under fire, focus among distractions, leadership when no one's watching, and making decisions based on your principles, not your circumstances. After you've developed this, after you've trained yourself in it, your entire existence transforms. Your energy alters, your presence evolves, your discipline sharpens, and your opportunities grow. Not because the world handed you something new, but because you became someone new. Now it's yours to carry. No one can do this work for you, and no one else gets to take credit for it either. This is your habit to create, your thinking to mold, and your standards to set. When you live it constantly, not just occasionally, you stop seeking greatness, you start living from it.